that provide balance. Present the facts and let the listener or the reader make the decision. Anyway,
Yes.
I see we got somebody. Boy,
I'll
she's
tell
much
you.
better looking than you, Jiggy.
Well, and she's much better dressed than I am too. That is fantastic. She looks like she's straight out of a Johnny Cash music video, which is awesome. We have got a great guest with us today. She joins us live here on our broadcast. Gail Rubin is with us, and you can get more information on our website, agoodgoodbye.com. And she joins us today here on our broadcast. She was also a 2019 Women of Influence Award winner, which immediately disqualifies her from being on this show, but I'm glad that she's here. Gail, tell me and Mr. Mazzella a little bit about yourself, my friend.
Well, I am a pioneering death educator. I actually came to this field from a background in public relations and event planning when I was...
That's awesome.
And I got married for the second time in 2000, had a really creative Jewish Western wedding, and everybody had such a good time. I wanted to write a book about creative life cycle events and call it Matchings, Hatchings, and Dispatchings.
That's awesome.
So about weddings and births and deaths, and I got to write a monthly feature in our local newspaper, and it was the stories about death and funerals that got the most reader response. So I figured there's a real need to be able to talk about this topic, because so often when people find out I'm a death educator, that's death, not deaf, they're like, ooh, hushed tones. So we need to bring death out of the closet, because despite great advances in medical care, humans do still have a 100% mortality rate.
Yes.
We are all going to die. But you may not know this, less than 30% of adults do any end-of-life planning. That's wills or trusts, advanced medical directives, pre-need funeral planning. So yeah, and with this COVID-19 pandemic, mortality has really become top-of-mind awareness for so many of us. But we don't know what to do with it.
We have got a great guest with us today. She joins us live here in our broadcast. Gail Rubin is with us, pioneering death educator, which that is amazing. She starts serious conversations.
You know, that's absolutely ironic, because I just invited on my desk, on my show, a man who's just developed a website on funerals and death. So...
that's awesome.
No, because for instance, I don't know, a funeral can cost as much as $16,000, and you don't think about it. Anyway, it's funny you should mention it. At the age of 77, I'm looking at that end of life, as you put it, etc. So I'm really anxious to hear more. Please, I'll shut up and listen to you.
Now, you have created, and I would love to have you tell me and Don about this. You have created a thing called the Newly Dead Game to help families learn their loved ones' last wishes. Tell us about this, because this sounds ridiculous, but at the same time, it sounds fantastic as well. Tell us all about this.
Okay,
really
well,
cool.
The Newly Dead Game, if some of you may remember the TV show The Newlywed Game,
yes.
which pitted couples against each other, newlywed couples, to see how well they knew each other with various questions. Well, the Newly Dead Game is the original version was designed to test couples how well they know each other on end of life, their last wishes. And I actually created it because back in 2010, I saw a news story about a festival called Frozen Dead Guy Days. And yes, there is a frozen dead guy at the center of this festival held up in Colorado in early March. And I was I was frozen in my tracks looking at
That's awesome.
coffin races over a snowy obstacle course and a parade of hearses and all kinds of partying going on. And I said, I don't know how, but next year I'm going to be there at that festival and I'm going to be a part of it. And so working with a marketing guy, we actually came up with this idea for the Newly Dead game. And I approached them and said, I'd like to bring the Newly Dead game to the Frozen Dead Guy Days Festival. So in 2011, I debuted it, and boy, we had couples scrambling to sign up and play, and I've been going back ever since. And then about
Wow.
2 years ago, I created an individuals edition, so you didn't have to be part of a couple to play, and everybody in the audience could play along. And that's basically testing how well prepared you are, in terms of, have you made a decision about your disposition methods? Have you done advanced medical directives so that people know, do you want to be kept alive as long as humanly possible, or just let you go gentle into that good night? And questions like that. So yeah, I do offer the game as a digital download from my website, agoodgoodbye.com, and I also offer, if you buy the couples edition, you get the individuals edition as a bonus.
Absolutely amazing. Dawn, what do you think about that?
I think it's absolutely something everybody should do. It really is. My wife and I, we're in the process of doing just that. So, because if nothing else, we want to make sure the right people get whatever assets we have left, which having seen many families turned asunder, that alone, if you, and I don't know, I haven't seen your game, I'd be curious about it, but one of the questions I always ask, do you finally get to the hard question of that deposition of assets, dividing of assets?
Well, that's a more complicated question than you can tackle in a game. But yeah, the idea of, do you have a will, and is it up to date? One of those issues is that sometimes people will do a will and then years and years go by. In fact, I'm guilty of this. My husband and I, when we got married, we named a friend of ours to be our executor. And then about 17 years down the road, that person left town and moved to California. So we said, must be time to update the will. And in fact, you should revisit your estate plans every 3 to 5 years, because a lot can change. People move, people die, people get divorced, and oh yeah, you want to update your advanced medical directives. You do not want your ex-wife or ex-husband to still be in charge of saying yes, pull the plug, or not.
It's funny. I did run into many years ago a situation like that. I had to cover. But anyway, well, let me ask you the question. What are some of the basic questions you have couples ask each other in your game?
Well, would that person want disposition in terms of earth, air, fire, or water? So would that be burial for earth burial, fire, cremation, air, donation to science, so you just kind of disappear into thin air, or water, which there's actually a new disposition method which has actually been around for quite a while but is becoming more widely available, called alkaline hydrolysis. That is putting the body into a tank with water and some alkaline chemicals. They bring up the temperature, and depending on the method, they may add pressure in the tank as well. Well, it speeds up the process of decomposition from months to hours, and you're left with bones like you would be with fire-based cremation, but it uses 1/10 of the energy, and it's much more eco-friendly.
Like I really worry about echo after death. But anyway, But what I did find out, if you remember the engineer from Star Trek, and they paid all that money to get his ashes put up into space, and it turned out that it's not what he really wanted, but what a family member wanted for the purposes of fraud. What I'm trying to say about this is, should you be as specific as that about what you want?
Well, it's interesting. Yes, I think if you want specific things done with your body, with how you want a funeral, Franklin Delano Roosevelt actually wrote a letter spelling out what he wanted for his funeral arrangements. But then he didn't talk to anybody about it. He put the letter in his personal safe. And after he died, they found the letter in the safe. And basically, he did not get the kind of funeral arrangements that he wanted because he didn't talk to anybody about it.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's good to know what you want, but you also need to communicate those wishes.
Well, that's, to me, the toughest thing couples do is talking about. Well, they have a lot of issues they can't talk about, but death is probably one of the most difficult. How do you get them to talk to each other?
Well, I like to use humor and funny film clips to break down resistance to talking about death and funeral planning. And one of the easiest things you can do is find the Chuckles Bites the Dust episode of the Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yes, that is awesome.
It was a 1976 program, but with today's technology, you can find it and stream it. So Chuckles was the clown at the TV station where Mary Tyler Moore worked, and he's killed by an elephant as the grand marshal of a circus parade when the circus comes to town. So everybody in the newsroom is laughing and cracking jokes, and Mary's taking it all very seriously. And then at the end, at his funeral, she winds up laughing in spite of herself. Very famous scene. And then crying when the clergyman says, "Laugh for Chuckles." But at the very end of that episode, they all go back to Mary's apartment and talk about what they might want for their final arrangements. So it's a great way to start laughing about the topic of death and open the door to the conversation about what you might want for your final arrangements.
No, that's really great
Fantastic.
advice. Trouble is, we in society seem to say we should be morbid about death rather than acceptance. What do you say to that?
My motto is just like talking about sex won't make you pregnant, talking about funerals and end-of-life issues won't make you dead. So, I've been doing this for 10 years.
Great.
So far, so good.
Well, by the way, I like your shirt with the two deaths.
Oh, yeah, I think that is fantastic.
Thank you. Well, I also have T-shirts, one that says all men and women are cremated equal, and the other T-shirt says the one who dies with the most toys still dies.
But let me ask you this. Let's talk about the survivors, which funerals are really designed for. What advice do you give people to prepare for death? Prepare their people for? To me, the toughest thing is when you have a cancer patient or someone with a long-term decline. Do you work with people like that?
What I suggest is I do have a 10-page planning form that's free for download from my website where people can see just how much information you need to pull together to be prepared to help your loved ones be prepared. Because, just think about the top 5 things that you need to know before you go. Mother's maiden name, do you know your partner's mother's maiden name? Why is that important? It goes on a death certificate. Also, where your loved one was born, what their social security number is. Not everybody knows that. I mean, I sort of have my husband's memorized, but not to the greatest degree. But I know where to find it written down. And then think about this: if they were a veteran, you can get free burial space in a national cemetery, but you need their DD 214 form to be able to access that.
Yep.
And then the fifth thing that I always caution people about is we live such online lives. If you die and take your passwords with you, nobody's going to know how to shut down your social media, pay your credit cards, your bank accounts. So much of our lives are tied to usernames and passwords. If you don't have some way of keeping track of those and letting your loved ones know about all of that information so that those accounts can be shut down, they're going to be in a heap of trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So that those are some of the things, but also on this 10-page planning form that I offer, think about who should be contacted to let people know that you've died. So it used to be that, maybe your mom had a personal phone book in the kitchen or the den with, all the relatives and friends' names and addresses and phone numbers. Well, most of us have that stuff in our cell phones now, our smartphones. But, if somebody doesn't know the code to get into your phone, or if it's, a thumbprint or your eye pattern, that's going to be a problem getting into that list of information. So, it's more than just, burial or cremation or donation to science or whatever, but it's also all of these communications avenues. Is there insurance that can be accessed to pay for funeral arrangements or support the family? So you need to have all of that information pulled together to help make it easier for your loved ones. And, there are so many benefits to doing this. You can reduce stress and fighting among the family because they already know what you wanted. And if you prearrange with a funeral home, you can prearrange and not have to prepay. They will love it if you prepay. And in most states, what would happen is you actually buy an insurance policy that you still own the money, but it would guarantee the arrangements with the funeral home. My husband and I, we've put our information and our wishes on file, but we haven't prepaid. So that's our choice. But we don't have any kids, so we don't have to worry about passing any money on to anybody.
Well, the other thing is the list. I just found two of my parents' insurance policies that we never cashed, and they've been dead. We found them just about a year ago, and we're trying to figure out how we can go back to the insurance company to collect the policies, which we probably can't. So we always tell people to make sure you know what insurance policies are in place.
Exactly. If you don't let them know that person has died and then, be the named beneficiary, that's a shame. That's
it wasn't a lot of money, but it is a shame.
Yeah.
But I guess my other point I would like to ask is, what's your feedback from people? Do you get people who do the game, and what kind of feedback do you get from them?
Well, it's interesting when we have couples play the Newly Dead game. They will sometimes, like the Newlywed game. They would be looking at each other like, really? I didn't know that about you. So it can be very eye-opening. But I'm always encouraged by the couples. Seems like the couples that have been together the longest know each other the best in terms of these wishes. But it's always fun to test people and see how they come out.
Well, if I can go back to, I guess, the one issue that prevents people, they're just afraid of dealing with it, and bringing it up brings it closer. How do how do you get them to kind of see the advantages, given the fact that that's a big elephant to get them to overcome?
Well, when I give a speech, when I'm talking, humor is a great way to break down the resistance. People laugh, they get some endorphins into their system that helps them relax. And when I speak, I use film clips very often to illustrate different points, depending on what I'm talking about. And in fact, you may find this interesting. I do have a YouTube channel, and just recently, with us being stuck at home due to the coronavirus, I started doing videos, including film clips that talk about like funny funeral films. So you can watch some movies like Undertaking Betty or Elizabethtown or Bernie.
Yeah.
So there are different movies that show different aspects of the funeral industry and different kinds of funerals. One of the trends that I'm seeing these days is that certainly people have been making them much more personal and not so much cookie cutter religious events. But in fact, the coronavirus pandemic has thrown the funeral industry into a whole new world because we have to limit the number of people to 10 people or less, spaced 6 feet apart. Funeral homes have started streaming memorial services or funerals so that more people can actually watch from their homes from a distance, or also taking cameras to graveside burials to allow people to witness it without actually being there and running the risk of virus transmission. But it's interesting in this position that we find ourselves in regard to funerals because so many people didn't want to talk about funerals, and now we find ourselves in a place where you can't really have much of a funeral, not until something big changes. And then suddenly people are realizing, well, gee, I guess a funeral is an important thing to plan for and to have. So by being denied the ability to have a funeral where you get the personal in-person support of your community, people are going to Zoom or Skype to connect with people. It's not quite the same thing, but it's what people are doing now.
We had a Zoom funeral, and I found it so totally unsatisfying because the particular person was a woman I've known all my life. She knew me as literally a baby, and it was such an unsatisfying thing to have a Zoom at her funeral.
Yeah.
In fact, I grew up literally down the block from a funeral home. Italian American funerals are something to behold, where they are also periods of reconciliation, and we're not getting that in this period. So I find it very unsatisfying.
And I know in a number of the obituaries that I've been seeing in the newspaper, they're saying, in-person memorial service will be held later.
Which it never does.
Well, I mean, we are in unprecedented times, but...
Could I just point out to you one thing, that the New York Times obituary section has almost quadrupled. They're now up to 4.5 pages,
Wow.
where they could barely do 1.5 pages. But it's a tough subject, and I'm glad you're doing it. Can I have your website again? Because I'm going to go in there and download it so my wife and I can do it.
Oh, yes. A goodgoodbye.com.
Good. Can you spell it out?
A good goodbye. So you say AGOODGOODBYE.com.
Great title.
Thank you. Yes. And I also offer a 50-point executor's checklist, which is out of my book, Kicking the Bucket List, 100 Downsizing and Organizing Things to Do Before You Die. And that can be very helpful, realizing what you have to do as an executor after someone dies to then look at your own arrangements and realize, oh, there's all this stuff I need to do to be prepared myself.
Jiggy?
I'll tell you, this has been a fun one today, Gail. Thanks for coming on with me and Dawn. This has definitely been a great interview, and I would love to have you back because this has been fun. Thank you.
Well, we put the fun in funeral planning.
Well, I love if
great.
IQ was here. He would have had fun too.
Oh my God, we need to have you back when we have IQ Alrizzoli because he would love to chat with you. Gail, have yourself a wonderful day. I guess before we let everybody go, I want to start with Dawn. Give me some plugs here, my friend. How do people find the radio show and the books and everything else?
National Robotics Education Foundation, and the-nref.org, 2sbdigest.com, hashtag 2sbdigest, and my book, The American Family Sampler. That's enough for me.
Now, Gail, before we let you go, how do we find you on social media and pick up all your stuff and your website and everything?
So my Facebook page is Facebook.com/agoodgoodbye. My Twitter handle is @thefamilyplot. And
Oh boy.
That's great.
You do know how to market.
You do know how to market.
Instagram, well, look for @Gail Rubin on YouTube, GailRubin, and you can check out all my videos too.
Awesome. Well, Gail, you have yourself a wonderful day.